So today I want to talk about automotive repair and servicing vehicles during the economic collapse in SHTF. What I've got here is a Ford F-350 Super Duty. It's a 2001 model year. It's got the 7.3 diesel in it. And because of that, the brakes are substantial because the diesel engine has a lot of weight. Now what I want to talk about is servicing vehicles. Anything you can do yourself saves you a tremendous amount of money. On this F-350, it would cost me between $1,200 and $1,500 to have the brakes serviced on the front of this vehicle. I did the work myself, and the parts cost around $450, minus the core. So when we're looking at this, I replaced the full caliper assembly here, and that includes the frame. And when I got the parts, what I noticed was buying the frame and caliper together was actually cheaper than buying just a caliper. And then what I would recommend, anytime you're going to replace the caliper and the rotors, that you replace the flex line too. Because the only two times I didn't replace the flex line, it failed. And the way it fails is it becomes a one-way hose. And when you take your foot off the brake, it does not allow the brake fluid to back out of the caliper back up toward the master cylinder. And what that does is causes the pistons not to retract. So when you're working on these things, keep that in mind, because the flex hoses are usually $30 to $38. So it's best to just go ahead and replace them. Now, what I wanted to talk about is the fact that this would have been a $1,200 or $1,500 job. So if we approach this from two ways, number one, I saved over $1,000 in labor by doing it myself. If I did this work for someone else and I priced my labor at $600 rather than $1,000, I could have made money. Now, if you're doing work on other people's vehicles, I would recommend you buy the replacement parts rather than having them buy it or supply it. That way you know you're getting the right part. The other thing is you can return the cores to make sure they're viable for you to get a core refund before you determine the final total of the job. For instance, on this F-350, these cores are $45. So just working on the front of this truck, the core is $90 to $95 once you include the sales tax. So you want to make sure you're actually getting refunded that money before you get final payment for your work. Now, one thing I want you to think about and keep in mind is with fuel prices being as high as they are and people not having money, one thing that kills vehicles is not using them. And one of the first things to get hurt is the brake systems. And especially on Ford pickup trucks and larger trucks, these are dual piston systems. So for instance, here you got a piston here and a piston here. And what will happen is on this truck, one of the pistons froze, but the other one didn't. So it caused dragging on the brakes. Now, when you look at this brake pad that was dragged, the pad wasn't very old at all. But what happened is you can see the separation from the drag and the heat. Now on Fords, on these bigger trucks, they're notorious for having seized pistons. And what that leads to is destruction of the pads and possibly the hub because of the overheating. So you have to watch this. And what I've noticed is the two things that prevents that, number one, is using the truck weekly. If you let a vehicle sit and you get rust in those pistons, you're going to have a problem. The second part is the flex hose I showed you, replacing those. If you're going to replace the rotor and the caliper, replace the flex hoses. They've always been problems. Now, from the standpoint of making money, if you're comfortable working on your vehicle, then you can work on someone else's. And what you can do is price the job competitively or a little bit lower than what they would get from a mechanic. Now in my area, there's not many people that actually work on this kind of stuff. And you can specialize. If you're comfortable with Ford pickup trucks, you can work on Ford pickup trucks. If you're comfortable with all pickup trucks, you can just do them. If you don't like the weight of the pickup trucks and you prefer smaller equipment that's used to work on smaller vehicles such as cars, I've done a lot of work on Kias. And I've replaced a lot of brake systems and parts on Kias. When we talk about servicing different kind of vehicles, I've also worked a lot on Volkswagens, especially the diesel versions. And a lot of times you can make a significant amount of money just replacing the small parts. These are hub covers. They fit on the inside of the wheel and cover the bolt for the hub. Now what I found interesting here is I just replaced a set of 4. One of them had come off and got run over. The rest were all scratched up. And when I priced the parts, I found that I could buy all 4 hub covers and have them shipped free for less than I could buy 1 hub cover. So the customer was happy. Now, when you're looking at these, the one thing I like about Volkswagens is everything has a part number on it. And if you have that part number, you can get the exact match. Because what you're going to find out is stuff like this is specific to the size of the wheel and the style of it. So you need the parts number to make a match. And these are relatively cheap. Something like this, you can take 10 minutes, switch the stuff out, and you can make $20 or $30 doing it. Now, where these fail is you have these tension lips. And over time, they'll break. And once one breaks or cracks, eventually they'll come off the car. So what I found is if you replace one, replace all 4, because it costs the same money, and then you won't have the customer or whoever owns the car losing the hub covers. So that's just another instance of how you can make money doing simple things. And like I said, if you don't feel comfortable with certain repairs or replacements, don't do them. Just do the ones you're comfortable with. Because I think in the future, you're going to find plenty of willing people that will allow you to fix whatever it is you can fix. Now, one thing to keep in mind is you don't have to do it all. If you're comfortable with oil changes and brake work, you can just do that. So this is something to keep in mind for SHTF. Service your own vehicles. That makes them affordable. A lot of people in the future will not be able to operate vehicles if they can't work on them themselves. So please share your thoughts. We'll see you on the next video.